Hello there. I suggest you crochet a beautiful, delicate and very easy to knit pattern. The pattern of this pattern is only 2 rows. It fits quickly and is easy to remember. The pattern structure turns out to be quite relief. Elongated loops are used in this pattern. Due to this, the pattern is tied very quickly. This is how one side of this pattern looks like. This is what the other side of this pattern looks like. I knitted this pattern from Angora. In 100 grams, I have 550 meters and a knitting hook of 1 and 5 millimeters. We perform the first loop. And we'll tie 5 air loops. The first loop, the second, third, fourth and fifth. Then we perform 2 capes on the hook. In the first air loop, we will tie a column with 2 capes. Once again, we perform 5 air loops, 2 capes on the hook. In the first air loop we will tie a column with 2 capes. And so we'll tie the whole row. 5 air loops, and a column with 2 capes. We tied a chain of such rings of the required width of this canvas. Then we will link the next row. We perform 1 air loop, wind the hook into the first ring and tie 6 columns without a cape. The first column without a cape, the second column, the third column, the fourth, fifth and sixth column without a cape. The next ring is exactly the same 6 columns without a cape. The first, second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth column without a cape. So, let's tie the whole row. They tied the whole row with columns without a cape. Then we will link the next row. We perform 8 air loops. The first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh and 8th air loop. Then turn the knitting over to the other side. We perform 1 cape on the hook. We put the hook in a column without a cape and pull out a long loop. The first time is a long loop, a hook on the hook. The second time is a long loop, a hook on the hook, and the third time is a long loop. Once again, 1 cape on the hook. Now on this arch in the last column without a cape, we start a hook and pull out a long loop. The first time, the second time and the third time. We'll tie all the loops together. It turned out 2 lush columns. Then we perform 5 air loops, 1 cape on the hook. Now on the next arch we start the hook in the first column without a cape and pull out a long loop. Once again, a hook on the hook, the second long loop, a hook on the hook and the third long loop, a hook on the hook. Now on this arch in the last column without a cape, we start a hook and also pull out a long loop. The first time, the second time and the third time. We'll tie all the loops together. Then we perform 5 air loops. So let's tie the whole row. We tied the whole row almost to the end. At the end of this row, we will perform 3 air loops, 2 capes on the hook and tie a column with 2 capes to the end of this canvas. Then 1 air loop, turn the knitting to the other side and knit the whole row with columns without a cape. First, we will tie 3 columns without a cape, and in each next arch we will tie 6 columns without a cape. They tied the whole row to the end with columns without a cape. We performed 6 columns without a cape in each arch, and 3 columns without a cape were tied into the last arch. Then we will link the next row. We perform 5 air loops. The first, second, third, fourth and fifth air loop. Then we turn the knitting to the other side, perform 1 cape on the hook. On this first small arch, we start the hook in the last column without a cape, pull out the loop. The first time, the second time and the third time. Then we perform 5 air loops, 1 cape on the hook, we start the hook on the next arch in the first column without a cape, we pull out a long loop. The first time, the second time and the third. Once again, the cape is on the hook and on this arch in the last column without a cape, we also start the hook and pull out 3 long loops. Now we will tie all the loops together. We perform 5 air loops. So, let's tie the whole row. Further knitting of this pattern will continue in exactly the same sequence. These 2 rows alternate between each other. The first row of columns without a cape, and the next row, lush columns with elongated loops. As a result, such a voluminous, delicate, beautiful pattern turns out. This is how one side of this pattern looks like. This turns out to be the front side. This is what the wrong side looks like. It is also unusual and beautiful in its own way. Due to the elongated loops, knitting knits very quickly. I thank you for your attention. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for your support and warm pleasant comments. Let's knit together.